From the very beginning of this journey, I've been on a mission to rescue our country from a failed and very corrupt political establishment, very corrupt. We have to change it. In that mission, I will never quit, I will never bend, I will never break, I will never yield.
This is going to be a very tight race until the very end. This is going to be a very tight race until the very end. We are the underdog, and we know we have some hard work ahead. But here's the thing about us. We like hard work. We like hard work. Hard work is good work.
Those are some of the latest comments from Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris and Republican nominee Donald Trump with just 28 days until Election Day. Like much of the world, Canadians are looking to see how the outcome might affect us. A new report from this country's Chamber of Commerce is looking at the consequences of protectionist policies like Trump's proposed 10% tariffs on U.S. imports. If that tariff moved forward and other countries retaliated, the report estimates that Canadian incomes, would fall by 1.5%, productivity would drop by 1.6%, and the ensuing trade war would also result in roughly $1,100 in lost income annually for people on both sides of the border. How should the feds and potentially the next government tackle that prospect? Let's bring back the front bench. Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie. I'll start with you, Brian. I think the report also assessed total annual economic cost to be in the neighborhood of $30 billion. It's one of the first quantifications we've seen of this proposal, one that Canada has not received any assurances we would be excluded from. They got a lot to worry about on the Hill right now, but how worried should they be about this?
They should be worried. They should be very worried, and it's I think the main reason is because it's the fact that it's coming from both parties. So it's not like we can sit there and say, okay, well, if one administration gets in, we'll be fine, and if the other administration gets in, then we'll worry. I mean, in both cases, probably different approaches to it. Probably, I would hope and argue probably more sort of listening and trying to find compromise with one administration. You can probably guess which one I'm thinking of. But nevertheless, it's still sort of both parties are becoming more protectionist. So this isn't something that is a theory to think about. This is something that's very real. I think to sort of your preamble, Vassy, the idea of what should Canada do. I think previous governments have had a Team Canada approach. I think the Trudeau government did that as well, and I think that definitely is warranted over the next few months. When I was Premier, we certainly were asked to do everything we could to try to build up the narrative with our relationships with fellow governors. So those that we would meet at some of our New England and Eastern Canadian premiers summits and things of that nature. And I think that would work well, and I think it helped a bit in the sense that over 30 states have Canada as its largest export partner. So it's going to be a way in which you can get some advocates, depending on the administration, depending on the governor's political party, or even if it's sort of an opposing views, still getting advocates that are going to make it clear that they have to continue robust trade with Canada, hopefully not put the tariffs on, sort of this universal tariff, and if they do, to carve out Canada. And the last thing I'd say is we were asked also to speak to Americans as much as we could. Obviously, we were Canadian premiers, but try to do when we were in the U.S. interviews that would kind of speak to just the public at large. If the Democrats and the Republicans are sort of talking about protectionism, they're mirroring what they're hearing from Americans. So we have hopefully a role to play with this Team Canada approach of influencing Americans to think about Canada in a more positive light when it comes to trade.
The hard part, I feel like, for this government, Rob, or whomever forms the next government, is you can make the logical case, right? You can provide the numbers as we did previously. But, there's an analysis you could do that, and it's done in this one, that shows the cost to the U.S. economy, too, right? Which you would have anticipated might be built into the notion of even making the policy proposal in the first place. Like, tariffs make stuff more expensive for everyone, right, who has to buy goods. But it didn't. It didn't factor into it, and it's become a key economic proposal that Trump is putting forward. And lots of polls show he has, a lead on, at least when it, specifically on issues around the economy among swing voters.
Well, look, the politician that I cover, Premier Doug Ford, he is very worried about this. He's he knows Tim Walz, the vice presidential candidate, who's the governor of Minnesota. And they're trying to be agnostic at Queen's Park, but I think they would much prefer to see Kamala Harris be president of the United States than Donald Trump because Mr. Trump is so mercurial and unpredictable. And yes, Vassy, you're right. If you put a 10% tariff on everything that is imported into the United States, guess what? Prices will go up for Americans. Therefore, inflation's going to go up. What is that going to do to the U.S. economy? Heaven knows. It's not going to be good for it. It's not going to be good for us. And I don't think Mr. Trump has thought this through. I'm not even sure, frankly, from his explanation of how his tariffs would work, that he actually understands the notion of tariffs. I think he thinks, or he wants his voters to think, that Canada will pay this tariff or China will pay these tariffs. No, it's U.S. consumers that will pay higher prices for foreign-made products. So I just think that if they can drill that, and Brian's right, the premiers from across the country, doesn't matter if they're conservatives, liberals, or New Democrats, they are all saying the same thing, speaking to Americans and saying, look, we need to remind you that we are your biggest trading partner. Don't mess this up.
But you would think that Donald Trump, again, Lisa, would be familiar with that, given everything that unfolded with NAFTA, the steel tariffs from before, like the sheer volume of conversations that have taken place over the last 8 years across the border. And yet, still, this type of a thing becomes a proposition. And like Brian said, even on the other side, there is a vast amount of protectionist policies proposed to be put in place or already put in place under Joe Biden. So how do you figure that out?
Well, first of all, see the message loud and clear for what it is. They hear us, but they don't care. And if you want me to put on my cynical hat, I will tell you what I think is a possible solution, and that is to agree to spend 2% of GDP on defense and buy all your stuff from the United States. That's what it comes down to.
Tom, your thoughts on that? I will say that they have now, as of the summer, promised to spend 2%, though the timeline is far out, not till 2032. And it took a while to make the promise.
Not very credible.
They don't believe us, though. But they don't believe us.
They'll tell you in private meetings that they absolutely don't believe us. I get the same information on this one. But it is American self-interest that will finally decide. And when we were able to renegotiate the NAFTA, it was against the backdrop of an auto pact that went way back before the original Canada-US FTA, then the NAFTA. The day that you send a car to the dealership, it's been back and forth across the US-Canada border in various parts and forms any number of times. So they wouldn't just be hurting us, they'd be hurting themselves, and not just hurting consumers, hurting their whole economy. That's why the work that Brian described of talking to the governors, to working with the states that are so keenly involved. We are their second largest trading partner. They are our largest trading partner. And that has to continue. And it is one of the best results. It's the Liberal record on the economy is a bit of a debris field. But one of the few things they got absolutely right was the renegotiation of NAFTA. And they actually got rid of some very problematic stuff in there. And Canada came out smelling like roses. I think that if we appeal to Americans and what their interest is, we're going to be able to come through this one as well. But Donald Trump, to use the term that's just been used, is very mercurial. You can never predict what he's actually going to do because he doesn't understand any of the subtleties of this stuff. He just goes at it with a very blunt instrument. And you can never predict in advance how it's going to come out.
Yeah, unpredictability is the name of the game. Thanks, everyone. I appreciate the discussion tonight. Our front bench, Brian Gallant, Lisa Raitt, Tom Mulcair, and Rob Benzie.